Okay, so right now we're gonna make a wood grain tumbler that's gonna look like a bat. We're gonna put an Astros logo on it. We're gonna see if we can get this accomplished here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some alcohol ink, Holtz-Latte. I'm gonna take my brush and I'm just gonna sit here and I'm gonna brush the alcohol ink on here. I'm gonna put a little bit, brush it off. Put a little bit, brush it off. Make it into somewhat of a resemblance of a bat. Or I'm gonna try to anyway. We're gonna see how this works out. So I'm going to go back and forth, alternating from the bottom to the top, just to put some alcohol ink on here and brush it down. Get that look that we're going to look for. Just sitting here making sure that I get it everywhere that I want it. Like I said, I'm going to go from top to bottom, alternating. See, it gives that look that there was a knot there. I love working with wood itself, so this is real fun for me to make something that looks like wood. Just want to sit here and try and move that alcohol ink around. It dries fairly quickly, so you want to move as quick as possible, but you don't want to move too quickly that you spray it everywhere, because that stuff gets everywhere when you're brushing it like this. Because you're just going back and forth, and you're just throwing that ink around. So we're just going to keep going back and forth. Missed a little bit there, so I want to make sure I get that. I'm going to make a little knot out of it. Just going to go back and forth like that. Brush that up. Go to the next spot, brush it down. But once that alcohol ink dries, you can't move it around anymore. So you got to try to move as quickly as you can without spraying it everywhere. Just moving it around. Just gonna sit there, make sure I get all the spots of it. You don't want to see any white showing through. Didn't work out very well there, so we're gonna put some from the top, go down. We're gonna sit here and make it look kind of like a knot right there. Sometimes when you miss some spots, you gotta just improvise. See, I missed another, so we're just gonna sit there and do this again. Sometimes it's not as dark as I really want, so I'll sit there and I'll go over it and go over it till I get the desired effect that I want. We're almost finished with this cup. Now I did do another cup right before this one. I just didn't get it on camera. That one was a 30 ounce, made it look almost the same as this. Of course, you're doing this by hand, so you're never going to get them to look exactly alike. But I did the same techniques I did on that one on this one. So we're almost done. I'm going to go ahead and finish up this last little strip here, and then we're going to fix some things because I didn't really care for the way that it turned out around towards the bottom. That ring that's there was catching all that alcohol ink I was putting there. So, yep, you see me right there. I'm sitting there trying to brush it out. Didn't really work out, so I had to change some things. But finishing up that last little spot there. Try to get it look as natural as possible is what you're looking for. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to try to just brush that nozzle against the bottom just to get some on there so I can get all that alcohol ink out from that rim. Just brush it up. Make it look like you really cut into that wood. Since they're curved cups, it makes more sense that it would cut into the wood versus just be single stripes all the way down. So that's what I'm making it look like by doing this. Sitting there and bringing up that striations so it looks like it's more dug in. And see if you can tell there's a dark ring right there around that little rim. In doing this, it brings that alcohol ink right out of there and takes away that dark ring that's down there, because you don't really have that in the wood. You don't have a solid dark ring right across the bottom of it. And there I go, sticking my hand in the ink like a goofball. Sitting there making sure it looks the way I want it to look before I start the bottom. Alright, so I'm going to put some on the bottom. Move that around. I try to make the bottom look like the rings of a tree trunk, right? Because it's almost like it's cut right off the wood or right off the tree. So I'm trying to get that. Oh man, I got some on the sides. So I put a little too much on the bottom. And I should just leave it like that. Just brush down the sides. Should just brush down the sides and get this all done. There we go, just brushing it all up. There you go. So I'm sitting there trying to make those rings work. And I should have left it right there. But instead, nope, like I said earlier, less is more. We got to do this. But I didn't listen to myself. I went ahead and I messed with it too much, and it just did not turn out the way that I like it. But that's okay. All right. Looking at it one more time, make sure it is the way that I want it to look. And fix little things. Yeah. I don't really like the way that looks. It's too dark. So either too dark or too light. I try to fix as much as I can. Because I want it to look nice. I don't want it to look horrible. In my eyes, anyway. I'm my worst critic. So I don't like the gathering of those striations right there. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more messing around. Get that to smooth out a little bit better. Gotta fix that. There we go. Make it look like it came out. Just like I was doing with the rest of it earlier. Trying to make sure it looks like it's cut out of that wood. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and work with these guys. See how these guys want to spin. We're going to flip it this way. I can go ahead and work with these guys here. Just going to put some epoxy on there. This epoxy is already getting warm. I just used it for another cup. So that took a little bit. It's getting a little warm, getting a little thick. Let's try to get this on here as quickly and as easily and nicely as possible. We don't want any bubbles, so what we're going to do after I put all this on here and smear it on here and make it look fairly decent, I'm going to hit it with a heat gun so that I get all the bubbles out. I don't use a torch. I know a lot of people do. I'm not comfortable with them, so I just use my heat gun. I can turn that off and I don't have to worry about a flame. I put this parchment down for that reason. So when I have drips or anything come off the cup or off this little cup, the plastic cup that I use to put the epoxy down, when I get drips off of that, I try to hold it over parchment paper and the cups so that whatever drips I get off of that, it goes directly onto them, and not my floor, because I have hardwood floors and I don't want to mess them up. So I try not to get it on the floor. Doesn't always work. So we got to get the bottom. Make sure you always get the bottom. Don't want to forget that. Make sure that's nice and smooth, or as smooth as possible. Make sure we got the whole cup, so you go from the bottom up, or I do. Okay, that's that one. Alright, let's get this big guy here. He takes a lot of epoxy. So I'm working on a 20 and a 30 ounce tumbler right now. I did do the wood grain, and now my plan is to put a sports team decal on here so that I can sell to my sports people. I want to go ahead and make this into, I'm going to try to make it into an Astros cup. Yeah. I live in Texas, and a lot of us Texans are big Astros fans, so I've been asked to make some Astros cups, so that's what I want to do. Let's see how all of this turns out. Hopefully it looks great. I'm a little worried because they're not coming out the way that I really want them, but just got to keep on going, and eventually it may turn out more beautiful than what I planned on it. So hopefully we'll get that reaction and not, oh, that looks weird, or that didn't come out the way that I wanted it to. All new techniques for what I'm doing. I changed up my wood grain technique while I was doing that, so we'll see how well this works out for me and go from there. Alright, I think I got epoxy on everything. I've still got some left over, so I'll probably use this in a mold. Let me put that down right there. Let's hit this with the heat gun and see how that turned out, and if I need more epoxy. Just got to get as many bubbles out as possible. When you're starting the epoxy, it gets a lot of bubbles. So I'm trying to make sure that I don't really have to sand too much. Because if there's bubbles, I gotta sand, and it's a big old thing. Get the bottom, make sure the bottom's all nice and smooth. And to the next one. Get the bottom of that one. And it looks like we're good to go. I don't see any more bubbles. I see some dirt got on that one. I think that's dirt. Maybe it's just bubbles and I didn't pop. Yeah, I think we're good. Alrighty. Well, we'll let this cure for about 4 to 6 hours and see how well I can get some decals on there. Alright, see you in the next step. Alright, so let's go ahead and watch this cut up some of these decals as quickly as possible, because this machine is sometimes very slow, sometimes not. On this cut right here, it goes kind of slow because it's not a very smooth cut. It's really jagged. This machine's got to sit there and go through all those jaggedy little areas, get that cut out as nicely as it possibly can. It does take a little bit because of all those jagged little edges, so we're just going to sit here and watch it for a little bit. Well, it won't take very long because I only took little snippets of it. This one I wanted to make sure that you saw. It's real jagged, but it cuts it really, really well. Let's go ahead and see what we got coming up next. Alright, here's the back end of it. So it's just going to be the circles for the back end of the logo. And this way it just cuts it all real quick because I just use a circle shape to make sure that I have that background. Alright, coming up, here we go. We've got some images of it cut out. And then I wanted to make sure you saw what it looked like without the excess vinyl. And then here you go. That's all of it layered. Let's get it on the cut. Okay, so we are back. All of them are dry. I have my decals cut out. That one's going to go with this one. This one's going to go with that one. That goes over there. Alright, so we are going to have a whole new thing. So we're going to go ahead and take this decal off. Peel that back. I know it's little, but a little cup, so. Alright, we're going to put this right here. Smooth that on. Make sure it's all on there. Peel off the transfer tape. Voila. There you go. Okay, now for the next one. Do the same thing. Peel that off the back. Make sure where we want to put it is all nice and cleaned off, of course. And then try to get this as straight as possible. Smooth it down just like I did the other one. Make sure little to no bubbles as possible. Bubbles are our enemy. No bubbles for us. As soon as we can pick back up the transfer tape. There we go. Make sure everything stays on there because this one is bigger. We do want to make sure it stays on. Alright, and there you go. Now, next step is put on another layer or two of epoxy. And then hopefully it will be nice and smoothed out and ready to go. Alrighty, we'll see you when we start epoxy. Alrighty now. Let's go ahead and we'll start with these guys. I put the decals on there already, so we're good to go with the epoxy. Got this all mixed up. Go ahead and put a generous coat, hopefully, on these guys, and that way we don't have to do too much sanding. We don't have to do too many more coats. Maybe one extra coat after this, just for a light sanding, and then that final coat. This decal should not take up too much. Go ahead and get that all on there. I'm doing kind of a thin coat right now. We'll see how well this does. Normally does pretty good, so see how it works out. Sometimes my thin coats don't really work out very well for me, so I might, if I have enough epoxy to do both of these, then I will go ahead and make a thicker coat. And we'll see how that works out for me. Hopefully, I think I will. I got quite a bit left in here. What we really want to make sure is we don't have any epoxy repelling or anything like that, because then that creates little divots, and divots are a lot harder to sand out than the bubbles. The bubbles are a little easier. Get a little bit for the bottom. The nice thing about these non-glittered bottoms is you don't have to put a lot of epoxy on there at all. You just kind of rub it on there, make sure it gets everywhere. And honestly, hope and pray it freaking sticks. Sometimes it doesn't want to. Go ahead and give it a little drizzle for a little extra epoxy. All right, I'll let that spin around a little bit, and then I'll come back to it. In the meantime, let's work with this one. Like to make sure that epoxy gets on everything. And I'll go down. Just go up. Make sure, like I said, it gets on everything. Okay, now let's do this bottom portion real quick. Get the bottoms. All right. Get some more drizzling over here. And we'll put that down right there. It looks like the drizzling over here kind of floats, so we're good with that. Just make sure it does the same thing over here. It looks like it did. It's a little uneven, but that's okay. I'll hit it with the heat gun for a little bit and get those bubbles out. And also get this epoxy moving so it does level out and we don't have to worry about that. So you want to do quick movements with the heat gun, because if you leave it in one spot, it'll burn the epoxy. When it burns the epoxy, it does not turn out for a very nice color. You see it's starting to flow, so I want to stop. It's going to make it really uneven if I don't. But I do want to make sure I get all these bubbles out. Just make sure I got them on that logo real good. And there we go. We'll just let that go and see in about 4 to 6 hours. Again, because we got to make sure it cures. I tend to like to wait more like 6 to 8 hours before I sand, because then you take it off at 4, it's still a little bit soft and it's not as easy to sand. So when I'm going to do my sanding, I normally wait 6 to 8 hours. I'm closer to that 8 hour mark, maybe seven, just so that I make sure that it's nice and easier to smooth. It's not so soft. 4 hours is really just able to touch it. 6 hours is a lot harder and able to easier to sand. All right, so we're gonna let that sit, and I'll see you when we come back for the sanding. Well, I ended up not needing to sand, and I'll explain why here in a little bit. Got some epoxy mixed up. We're ready to do the next layer. Everything's nice and dry, good to go. Let's go ahead and pour this on here. The only reason why I'm doing another layer is because that decal repelled a lot of that epoxy, so it's a lot of decal still showing through. And we don't want that. We want that decal to be nice and sealed in there. So let's just get this rim and get all this epoxy on here. I'll do a semi-thick coat, probably about a medium thick coat, just to make sure we do get that logo put in there. Get it all nice and covered up. We don't want to have to keep putting on layers after layers after layers. Luckily, I didn't have to sand this because there was 0 bumps, which is really cool. I don't get that very often. Normally I have a few bumps, but because this did not have the amount of epoxy it needed, it repelled a lot of it. And the vinyl does that sometimes. It'll just repel this epoxy. And I don't know why it does it. I normally make sure that it's very clean, doesn't have any of my oils from my skin from messing with that vinyl while I'm layering it, because this one I have to layer. It's 3 layers of vinyl to get this look. So got 3 different colors. I don't really like to use printable vinyl. You can. I prefer water slide over printable vinyl. Um, if I need the image to look darker, I will do it. I will use printable vinyl. But if I want like an ombre look, make the top white, use a water slide. It works better for me. I don't have to worry about it sticking right away. I can move it around. Absolutely love them. But for this project, I decided, why not? It's only 3 colors. Let's just use regular vinyl. Um, so that's what I decided to do. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get this bottom all nice and covered. Make sure the rim's covered. And because I still feel like that logo does not have enough epoxy on it, still feels like it's going to come through, I'm going to sprinkle a tad bit more epoxy on here, let it run through. There we go. I'm not going to drag my hand over it so tight. Kind of moving that epoxy around. I don't want any fat bottoms or anything like that, so I don't want to pour a whole bunch. I'm going to leave it alone before I mess it up. Right, now for the big guy. I'm a little more generous with this epoxy because I know that it's got to cover that vinyl. Just moving this epoxy around. I don't want it to set still for too long, because if I do that and I've got like a pile of it, it'll just drip right off. This epoxy's not cheap. Don't want to be wasteful if we don't have to be. I mean, there's really no reason to ever have to be wasteful. Alright, so go ahead, go up. Just make sure we got everything covered. I'm not pushing and dragging, I'm just moving the epoxy. Alright, so make sure we got everything. Alright, looks like we got everything covered. It's just a lot of bubbles. So let's go ahead and take that glove off. Grab the heat gun. Pop the bubbles. Get the bottom. We don't want to just let it sit there, but we also don't want to leave any bubbles behind. We want that nice smooth finish again. Oh, I don't think I got the bottom. Alright, so looks like we're good there. We're going to go ahead and let these sit for another 6 hours. And we'll come back to them tomorrow because it is kind of late. So we'll come back to them tomorrow. Alright, so we didn't need another coat. Here they are. They're all done. Look at this. So pretty. They came out a lot better than I expected. That wood grain was on point for these. It looks so good. I'm absolutely in love with them. Oops. They are perfect. They don't have hardly any blemishes. And of course, they're handmade, so you know, every once in a while you're going to find those. So it's just part of the process. All right, here we go. These are the final ones. They're all done. Thank you for watching. See you next time.